welcome. Take a seat. I feel like you're quite far away over there. Now let's fill the gap. There we go. Thank you. Paul, if I can come to you first of all. We've heard about the great work that's going on at Goldman Sachs. You have said before that mental health, it doesn't really come as a surprise, is one of the biggest taboo areas in the city. Why do you feel that is, and what can be done about it?
Well, I do feel that it is the last great taboo in the city. I mean, I've worked in the city now for over 30 years. I've run some of the largest trading floors and investment firms. And I've seen it myself. I think it comes predominantly from a macho culture more than a high-performance culture, quite frankly, where it's not just target-driven, but it's almost a lot of firms, certainly some of the ones I've grown up in, almost require you to go to burnout. Now, I've also struggled with my own mental health issues, which emanate from my childhood. So I've grown up with a lot of anxiety, PTSD, flashbacks, and you just kept it to yourself. And I've seen in the city what happens when that happens. People fall back on the old coping devices of alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling. It leads a lot to eating disorders. People feel out of control. My own family's been, it's been a scourge in my own family. And I felt I've got to the position where I can, I guess the pain of keeping silent outweighed the risk of speaking up. It took me 2 decades to go and get help for myself. I'm in a position now to make some change happen and speak up about it. So I'm trying to do that. I've been trying to do that around the city, talking about my own situations. I've been trying to do it in our company. We have a program at Quilter called Thrive. I set myself the personal goal to create the environment where our people can thrive. I created a video about my own situation, my own mental health struggles, and I sent that around our 5,000 employees. And we've had more of an impact from that, more of a response from that, than just our normal strategy and vision. People have engaged. I've had some of my most accomplished investment managers, financial planners, senior executives come to me and say they've struggled with PTSD, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, high anxiety, high functioning anxiety. It's been like the whole company just took a breath. And I think it really has unleashed something. So I think to a large extent, HR departments are not well equipped in our industry to deal with this. And often it is left to HR departments to deal with it. I think it takes people to make it personal. We have a saying, don't we? Don't take it personal. I think this is an area where take it personal. You have to take it personally. And I think it's starting to happen.
You said it took you 2 decades before you finally dealt with some of those challenges you experienced. What was it like having that initial conversation? Who did you speak to? What happened?
Well, even to begin with, I didn't speak to anybody at the firm. I won't talk about the firms I was at, but it just felt inconceivable to me that could happen. I felt it would be a sign of weakness. I thought maybe I would lose my job. So I ended up going to basically a facility for 6 weeks, and then another one for another couple of weeks. Of course, at that point in time, I had to talk to my boss, so I did talk to him at the time. He was very supportive. He didn't really know how to deal with it. The organization at the time wasn't very well equipped to deal with it, but it was personally supportive. So, I mean, in a way, I even went somewhere for 6 weeks before I even spoke to my manager, and that was quite telling. And so I want to make sure that we've got in my organization a situation or an area where people know it's okay not to be okay. Some of the most accomplished people I've ever met have struggled with mental health. And someone said to me years ago, a very good friend of mine, very successful, He said, and he struggled with his own mental health for a long time. He said, Paul, the greatest pain in life is the inability to control your own mind. And I think to a large extent that's true. But I think part of that is opening up and talking about it. And it just, it makes you realize that you're not alone, because it's such an isolating thing. You're surrounded in environments where high performance, highly intelligent people, and yet you feel completely isolated within that environment. So I think just opening up, creating that supportive environment can really help.
Tackling the stigma is one of the biggest challenges. Sinead, Shell's remit for the past couple of years has been exactly that, tackling the stigma. How have you gone about this, and why has it been so important?
Yeah, there's actually a great deal that resonates what Paul just talked about. If you think about the company we are, again, high-performance culture, very male-dominated historically, beginning to improve, and a great deal of engineers and scientists and people that are used to being given a problem or an issue and solving it. And so not very good, therefore, when the problem is about themselves, and also when they don't know what the solution is to it. And so we've been working on this for probably a decade, and there's been some areas where we've seen some successes both in prevention and in response. But it's all very well having lots of solutions to a problem, but if that problem only manifests itself quite late when it's serious and people don't feel they can say that they're not okay, then you've not got it right. You've not got the culture change that you need. And it became very clear to us that we were dealing with this sort of from a head point of view, if you like, but not from a heart point of view. And that was really the shift that we took about 18 months ago, which was to focus really as one of the key pillars on reducing the stigma. And I guess at the heart of that was our "I'm Not Okay" campaign. So very much to the "It's okay to not be okay," and we trialed it in the UK where we had fantastic response, and rolled it out globally. And there's lots of elements to it, but if I think about some of the things that really moved the dial, they all come back to creating an environment where people feel they can put their hand up and say, I'm struggling. So we had a one thing wall, which is like a platform where you could post the one thing that made a difference to you when you were struggling with mental health. And that's quite a new thing to a company like Shell, and we really weren't sure whether anybody would post. And the response to that, both in terms of the people posting, but also the people reading it, it's been tremendous. We have had a number of very senior leaders step out and talk about struggles with bipolar or their own issues with mental health, actually at times of great professional success and creativity. But I think the moment in the UK where things truly shifted for me and my organisation was the spring of this year. And it was like this watershed moment. So we had a panel discussion, and a number of very brave colleagues volunteered to come and talk about their own struggles with mental health in a very raw and emotional way. And we had a guy come and talk about how a year ago he had almost thrown himself in front of a train. We had another colleague talk about, despite being seen as super high performing and on top of everything, a number of things that happened in her life, and she got to a point where she couldn't cope anymore. We had one of our best graduates tell how he texted his line manager saying he wanted to commit suicide. And the room was full. But there were 600 colleagues on the line. That's 12% of our UK population. And the response to that was just incredible. It was a little bit like that people like me moment. All of a sudden it became okay to talk about these challenges. And that's what moved it from being sort of the usual channels. I mean, Shell Health are amazing. We have a fantastic HR department. But after that, it grew organically. People volunteering it in team meetings as safety moments. And I think now I can see that that's created the opportunity for the culture change that I want in Shell businesses in the UK. We're nowhere near where we need to be. But the number of people that have stepped up and out and are talking freely and openly about how they're feeling and their challenges and asking how they can support their colleagues has been quite something. So I think we're moving into the heart, which is, for me, hugely important.
Michael, what are your reflections on what you've heard so far? What impact has company change in respect of mental health and how it's dealt with had on Ogilvy and yourself?
So we went through a massive change nearly 2 years ago as an organisation, and we moved the business from being multiple operating companies into one. So it went from being a very tribal business to something that was very inclusive. and open. And it kind of, the impact was huge, because on the one hand, we were telling people and motivating them to open up and collaborate and integrate as one. But as we were doing that, and as we moved from a very parental culture into a much more peer-to-peer culture, people wanted to open up. So we were asking them to, and then they were. And so what we had to do behind everything that we did was to create an environment of support. And that's one of the key, I think, one of the key impacts and things that we had to do and continue to do is, as you go through transitioning change in a company, ways of working, geographical location where people sit, that's kind of easy. But the transformation, the behavioral transformation, the cultural transformation takes a hugely long time. And I felt it myself as we went through that change. There were two big things that I never want to have to go through again as we went through the change. The first one was the feeling of isolation. So when you go into a job and you are trying to go through a massive change where the leadership of the business doesn't necessarily agree or on board with what you're trying to do, so you have no team around you. So all the decision-making, all the pressure then aligns to you personally, and that's very tough. And then added on top of that is, because we are a leader in our market, in our industry, is the trade press and the press more widely debated, discussed and commented on every decision I made pretty much every day for about 6 to 7 months.
What impact did that have on you?
It was very difficult. I have training, my background is in PR, so I kind of know a bit about how to deal with journalists and how to deal with the press. However, nothing could have prepared me for it. And I think for me, it was about having a plan. So having kind of a North Star, sharing that plan with the company, with our clients, consistently, and just always going for that North Star. And then as quickly as possible, finding that support network for myself as well. So creating the right team. And I'm privileged now to have an incredible team around me. And that was really, really key, really important.
Thank you. Steve, what is your company, a global company, doing to address workplace mental health?
Yeah, we're doing a lot, but if I just take it back for a second, 4.5 years ago, I became CEO of this amazing global company. We're headquartered in the US, but we have 400 offices around the world, 52,000 employees, 9,000 here in the UK, 1,000 in London. And what I'm trying to build is that this is a people business. We provide services for infrastructure. A lot of the things everybody here knows about, airports, Heathrow, the London Olympics back in 2012, we helped build that. The Westminster Abbey right next door, the palace, we're renovating it as program manager. And so we do all these amazing things, yet when I arrived at the company's culture was sort of in disarray. And as we did a big survey across the company and try to identify what were the gaps, one of the biggest things was around a lack of inclusivity. Clearly, diversity was lacking. It was a very male-dominated culture, all men running the company, all located in the United States, and we have this big global company. And so as we started peeling the onion and diversified the company, today 60% of my executive leadership are women. It started creating a dialogue around the table of how do we really figure out what's on the minds of our employees. And as we reached out, the major feedback we got is we need to address mental health. And so a few years ago, we started a major positive mental health awareness and initiative. And today we have trained 1,600 mental health champions. So we have champions at every office when, I just described the scope of our company. And so it was important that we had it everywhere. We've upgraded our employee assistance program. We've been destigmatizing the conversation. I do probably 2 town halls a week around the world. What's, I think, impressed the employees is when I do these town halls, I don't talk about profitability. I don't talk about the typical business things. What we talk about is culture. And we talk about openly mental health and how to all feel like we can bring our whole self to work and what do we need to do about it. And it's normalized the conversation, and it has created a whole culture change in the company where people feel comfortable to talk about the things that we're talking about here and the previous individuals talked about, and it's really unleashing where people feel inspired and that it's a company they belong and that we're really going to help each other address these things. And we have to be sensitive that there's, around the world, there's different ways of doing it. And so we let each of the local regions decide, how to really get the conversation going and put initiatives in. In the Middle East, we have an Are You OK program, and it's all about stress management, bringing in stress equipment to be able for employees that want to monitor their stress, and that's really created a culture of caring in that region. Here in the UK, we have a Mates and Minds initiative that's working with our clients. And so we're getting the best practice sharing and engaging with our clients, which really takes it to another level. I think broadly across the company, a big part of it is that we've extended all this to families. So it's not only our employees, but it's the families of our employees, because as we heard, it could be ourselves, or in my case, for example, what really kind of helped me get on board as the CEO of the company is that I've got family members that have suffered with this. And I was ignorant growing up when my sister was struggling, and then my own son, that I have been a much more positive leader in the family. And so the fact that we can link the family and the business and ultimately bring this together has been transformational for our culture at Jacobs.
Steve, thank you. Penny, can you talk about what's happened internally at Direct Line and the projects you're currently looking at?
Yeah, our journey started about 2 years ago, and it started because we had 4 suicides in the company. We have about 10,000 employees. It's not statistically awry. It wasn't anything that we could see that was due to us, but none of that matters. The consequences are devastating for the people around them, family, but also colleagues. And it just didn't feel right. And we decided to start exploring it. And what became apparent in the first conversation was there wasn't a member of the ExCo who didn't, within either themselves directly or a really close family member, have someone suffering. So we kind of expanded on that. And Johnny Benjamin, Neil Label, came to talk to a conference of ours of around 600 people. And it was a little like sort of whispering at them, "Are you lot okay?" And having people yell back at you, "No, we need help." It was incredibly powerful moments, and I think you've both used the word unleash, and I think that really sums it up. And since then, we've had a number of programs running. So we've trained all of our people managers, about 1,000 people, in dealing with mental health issues and understanding and how to talk about them at the very least. We have mental health first aiders on every floor of every site, a huge training program there. Similar to some of the things Sinead was talking about, very personal, vox pops and things running quite often so that people get used to that environment. And we already had a very engaged environment. It wasn't that we were starting from a poor place. It's just that this topic had not got the attention. And that was 2 years ago. We're now sort of expanding beyond that and trying to get more to some of the causes underneath. We have a very young population in parts of our business. So we're starting to introduce financial well-being as a topic and education programs around that, working with salary finance to help people budget and so on. Just trying to work through some of the underlying causes to try and help provide some practical levers as well. But the other thing we're doing is also looking at our customers and more broadly at society and saying, well, how do we play our part there as well? Because it's all very well working out how to have a conversation with someone, but if all you're going to do is point them into a system where there's not enough support for them there either, how do we help change those things? So we've introduced a bereavement team to deal with customers who have lost or are on the verge of losing loved ones. And we're piloting something where when our call handlers are superb at understanding where people are, what their state of mind is. And we're piloting at the moment whether we can provide signposting systems to support services for them when we think they might appreciate that as well. And we'll see how that develops. And then finally, we work with Mind to try and help them to raise money to try and help them fund their care lines and so on and so forth. So we're trying to start moving the dial slowly across the piece. But it is, it's interesting, a lot of us have talked about the same timelines. There is a whole movement, I think, now happening. And we're all making it up a little as we go. There isn't a playbook for how to get it right. So conferences like this, sharing those experiences is really important.
Just want to remind you at this stage that you will have the opportunity to ask questions in about 10 minutes. So please do submit them on Slido, and you can, of course, remain anonymous. Is talking about mental health by leaders just for their own good? There might be, if you're a cynic, you might say, well, talking the talk is one thing, walking the walk is another. Some might call it a publicity stunt or talking about the things they should be talking about. Paul, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, somebody said that to me recently. He said, Paul, is this really a publicity stunt? And I said, absolutely. It's a great career opportunity for me going around the city talking about my mental health problems.
Great response.
Publicity, certainly, but not a stunt. The only way we're going to get the message out is for leaders to stand up and be counted and be personal about this and talk about it. I was really bowled over by Stuart and Aaron talking about their experiences. So if they can do it at their stage in their lives and their careers, we need to be able to do it. And so many of us don't.
Sinead, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so underestimates the bravery it takes for leaders to stand out and talk about their personal challenges. It's quite shocking to me. It's even a question, to be honest. Everything we've seen and everything I've seen in 25 years in the energy sector, leadership has to start. Culture is set at the top of an organization. You can get clusters of brilliant culture scattered around, but if you want to change a company, your leaders have to believe and have to be talking about these things. So I think it's completely fundamental, but it's not enough on its own. It's a quite important thing. You have to, as others have said, line managers need to be supported and trained. And there's absolutely no doubt that you have to accept that everybody's different, and so the channels that are useful for one person or one leader don't work for another, and so you really need to have a box of tools that you can support people with. I think that's hugely important. And then the other piece, which leaders have a very big role in, is you have to look at all the enablers to a healthy life and a healthy, happy work environment. And that does mean getting into the detail of how you support flexible working, how you support people during bereavement, family care policies. All those pieces of the puzzle have to come into this. It has to be an integrated approach, I think, to move the dial.
Michael?
So I think awareness is great, and I think if anyone accuses people of it just being a publicity drive, I think that's a sad place to be. However, it's so important to create the right environment. And I think those checks and balances are really, really important. So in my business, we have an inclusion board, for example, which is not the C-suite, it's not the board, it's a separate group of people who hold us accountable to everything from diversity, inclusion, mental health and well-being. And so we as a leadership team are held accountable to it. We also hold, we have a program called Ogilvy Thrive, which is where we've placed all the benefits in one place. So it's giving parity to not only your financial benefits, but also all the support networks, mental well-being at work, all of those support and benefits all come together. So people can actually kind of ebb and flow in between them and find all the support. So financial support as well, etc., all of it together. And it annoys me when I see people, companies who will just brand a day and that's it. and there's no fulfillment of it. There's no expertise. So like everyone else, just like compliance training has to be done by all managers, mental health training has to be done by all managers as well. And we're also training more and more people to be a mental health first aiders and allies, again, for all the same reasons that the others have mentioned.
Penny?
Yeah, one of the proudest moments, I think. I'm a relatively new CEO, so I went on my statutory visit all the sites sort of trip, but the first time I walked into the Manchester office, where we've got several hundred people, the first person I saw came up to me, and she said, I know you're the new CEO, and I need you to do something for me. So I said, what? I said, I need you to give an award to the person sat over there. So I said, why? And she said, because I have debilitating anxiety, and I can't get out of bed some mornings. And he phones me up and makes sure I get out of bed and comes into the office, because he knows that I'm better when I have more self-worth when I'm talking to someone and helping customers than I do when I'm at home. So every day he phones me up and he gets me out of bed, wakes me up and says, come on in. And I'm much better for it. And that's an extraordinary thing. It's an extraordinary thing for someone to share that with a new CEO who they've never met before, no idea what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say. And an extraordinary thing for a CEO to hear, because it's both a very personal thing, and you want it to work, and you want it to work for us, and you really want it to work for her. But also, when you're running an organization of thousands of people, you have to believe that people can talk, they can feel comfortable to shout out about all sorts of things, mental health and many other things. In a place where someone will share about their own anxiety, it's very hard to believe that other things will go hidden either. So it's powerful on many, many levels.
Steve, how do you get senior leadership buy-in? What would you recommend to those who need to make a business case for it?
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought up the business case, because, look, I think we're all doing this because fundamentally it's the right thing to do. We care about people, but it is good business. That happy, productive people will, create value for companies, and they'll thrive and they'll grow, and it all creates the business growth that we all looking for. But I take it a step back, and I think that what leadership's responsibility and what our responsibility as CEOs is to make sure that there's a cascaded leadership throughout the company that are all aligned on truly living and breathing the culture, and it's not a check the box off. And for me, when I came into the company, it was to make sure that at the end we have authentic leadership cascaded through the company. And it's great that I stand up and talk all about these cultural initiatives at the company, but if it breaks down below me, then I lose credibility and the culture fails at Jacobs. And I think what we've done is we've reshaped the leadership. As I mentioned, we not only diversified it, but we made sure that these are leaders that truly believe in culture first, and everything else is going to fall into place. And I think that's what has to happen for a successful positive mental health initiative or any other cultural initiative that is being driven in a company.
Paul, the link between financial well-being and mental health, how can we start to tear down the macho-ness of the city?
Yeah. Well, I think, and the way I do it is I guess I'm 5'3", so rule by fear is not an option. I've got to get on with people. And I think in a way you start again by keeping it personal. So, but financial well-being and mental well-being are so fundamentally linked. So we have an initiative across our company, like all our colleagues here, called Thrive. And a lot of it is about ensuring that financial well-being, personal well-being, emotional, mental health well-being are all linked. So you can get advice any day in terms of your financial situation, debt counseling. And we know from some of the statistics that Barbara was putting up before that there is such a link between financial and mental well-being. And again, particularly among young people, And often we don't think about this enough, but also across the whole spectrum, no matter what wealth level you are, there is. So I think one of the key things, again, is talking about it, because we don't talk about our mental health. It's one of the taboos. And strangely enough, talking about our financial situation is a bit
Also
of a taboo. So you've got the two taboos themselves. You know, we don't tend to talk about either of them. So I think it starts again with just really creating an open culture. And I'd really suggest people, this is one area where you don't need a grand strategy. If you plan it all out and strategize it all, you'll never start. Talk at the board. Talk around the board about it. Talk around your executive teams, for CEOs around your executive teams, and then get started and put it out there. And then I think for those of us who are certainly running larger companies, you can provide the financial counseling as well as mental and emotional support to your people. And just doing that makes people come forward. They come forward, you set up their own blogs, they come forward and talk to each other about it. We have Thrive ambassadors across our company, 120 odd Thrive ambassadors now. So people also know where they can go to get help.
Thank you. Let's take some of your questions now. How do you select mental health allies? Are volunteers the right ones, as they may not be the best? Who wants to pick up on that one? Penny, let's come to you.
Well, we have used a volunteering basis. Our main problem has not been that we can't find the right kind of people, because we train them, and actually volunteering is a pretty good way of assessing people's interest and aptitude. Our real problem is we were 4-to-1 oversubscribed. So I think the more we can evolve that, get people trained, broaden that population, encouraging people. This is all about unleashing a force of people, not doing stuff top down. So we'll keep building that population out. And their job is really to listen and to signpost, not to be replacements for true counsellors. So.
12 years ago, I interviewed for a job and was told I ticked all the boxes except I was too nice to be a leader. Are we changing this view at recruitment? Steve.
Well,
I'll jump in. I think
Unbelievable.
I think you've got a question about the culture of the business. So the actual recruitment process, I think, has evolved over time anyway, generally, and there's things like blind recruiting now. That's something that we do a lot of. So we don't look at CVs, we don't look at where people's backgrounds, we look at the talent, and because we're a creative business, we look at their creative output. But I think this person, the problem here is the culture of the business. And I think we have to change our cultures to ensure that we are allowing diverse and inclusive people to come in and being able to support them all the way through the business.
Yeah, I think this is a huge opportunity for all companies. I'll take Jacobs, for example, where we run big, iconic programs all over the world. And what I found when I came to Jacobs were the engineers or the program managers that did the best got promoted. Well, they didn't necessarily make the best leaders. Maybe they were great project managers, engineers, but did they really have the full suite of what it takes to be a leader? So, I think you need to be nice as a leader, but you also need to be tough. You need to know your job. You need to be ethical, and it's a whole suite of skills and capabilities. But I think more and more the companies that are making sure that leaders have inspirational skills is a fundamental, whether you call that nice or just caring about people to really win the hearts and minds and inspire and create a culture, I think is critical for all future leaders.
What would you recommend other CEOs should do if they haven't started their mental health strategy journey? Sinead?
Start
talking. It is as simple as start talking, but probably more as important, start listening. Ask open questions, engage. I mean, we heard earlier from Aaron and Stuart, engage with some of your young professionals. Sit there and just listen to their stories and how they find your organization. Because I think unless you do that and you ask those questions at different levels in your organization, you don't know your organization very well. And I think it is crucially important that a leader does show curiosity and emotional intelligence and empathy and listen hard. And you know, really there's, in this day and age with where the whole world is going on the need for an inclusive sort of culture of care and how millennials and Gen Z are choosing who they work for. If you want good talent, I don't think you can not be talking about mental health.
Can I just add to that? The title of your conference today is about empowerment. Many of the things you do as a CEO or a leader, you have to drive something from the top to get things to happen. My experience of this is it's about creating permission. Actually, it self-drives a lot with some help, with a little bit of structuring here and there. You know, 4-to-1 ratio of the people apply for a mental health first aider job. People really want to get involved, so it's creating that permission and opening the conversation is the start point.
Employee assistance programs are great for employees first experiencing mental health concerns. However, I've experienced these fall short of helping long-term sufferers. Is there a solution?
There is always a solution. One thing I would say is what we're not trying to do, and I don't think any of us are trying to do, is turn our people into professional counsellors. And I think if you try and do that, you'll fail, okay? Our people can't be professional counsellors. What you're trying to do with our Thrive programs, with our wellbeing programs, is letting people know, be able to look out, identify issues. People know they've got someone they can go to. And then from there, we can actually help them get sometimes the professional counselling that they need. So I think the first and foremost is to ensure that some people do need longer-term professional counselling, and it needs to be available, but it's probably not going to be available from your own employees. It's their job to be able to be supportive, to be able to identify it, to be able to have conversations with people, and that they know how to then enable those employees to get the help that they need.
Yeah. I just say, I guess we've really seen the employee assistance programs be very, very powerful as a sort of maybe a second line. If your first line of defense is your line manager and your colleagues and maybe HR, as that sort of second line of defense. But the role of the EAP program is, in a way, to support the person in finding the longer term professional help that they need. And certainly we have seen over the last 6 months, we've had 11-12% of employees contact the EAP. That's a lot higher than a year or two ago, and 30% of those calls are around mental health. So you can see once you open the door, people are more inclined to use those facilities.
So we have had to upgrade ours because we weren't comfortable with the quality as we started to really push and understand what was going on.
Right.
So we have upgraded that. And I think there is all of us need to keep fighting for stronger services out there beyond our own companies as well, because as more of us get engaged, the pressure we put on those services actually increases. So the demand is huge.
What advice do you have for rolling out a global program on mental health when certain culture remains very private and don't overtly, at least, want to get involved? That's from Joanna.
So I guess from...
Oh,
sorry, Joanna.
No, you go. You got a global company. Yep.
Sorry, we have, I guess, the pillars are, we have a global mental health framework, and the pillars are the same, and it is around reducing stigma, opening up conversations, and then promoting all the support that's available within the company and beyond. And there's a lot of toolkits and support, but we accept that this can look different in different countries, and so local leadership are empowered to shape the program for what their needs are in that country. And so that mix of a framework which is global and pulls in best practices and learnings from different markets and different leaders in different countries, but you as a leader can then think about what's the right thing for your market. I think has been quite effective for us so far.
Do you think mental health issues from your employees were also due to the high stress working environment at your firm? Don't know who that's aimed at in particular. But
so being in the creative industries, we do have a very high stress environment. And so no doubt that stress does cascade through and does create issues. But for us, it's been about changing the culture and behaviours of our ways of working. So a high stress environment doesn't have to mean cruel ways of working. You can have nice people, you can have a nice, supportive, friendly environment to get you to the end. We have a lot of late nights, we have a lot of over weekend working. It's just the way that our business operates. But ensuring that you balance that, the work-life balance is incredibly important, giving people time off in lieu, ensuring that when people are on site and are working late nights, they have all of the facilities that they need. So it's not... we wouldn't be able to operate our business if we took that kind of stress levels out, or I should say the stress on delivery out, but ensuring that our people are comforted through it, supported through it, and understand, and also for us as leaders to be clear that if it's not for you in that role, because you can't handle that stress, then let's look at a different role and a different way of working. So it's about being very, very open and being flexible around working environments.
Yeah. The question's disappeared. We are out of time, but a very quick point, if you will, on a question that came in that said, we've talked a lot about support, what about prevention? I think that's a really good point, especially when it comes to working environments. Who wants to take that as a last point?
I think all of these things are about creating an environment that helps people who are having difficulties, but also helps people identify it before they get to that point. So prevention is a broad sweep from can you create policies and flexible working policies and things that perhaps help take the strain out. But the source of mental health issues can be so varied, so broad, so deep-seated that you can't possibly help to unravel all of those. But I think the best thing you can do is have an environment where people open up and can deal with them much earlier when it's much more accessible.
Thank you all for your time and thank you for your questions.